What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to a Social Matrix podcast. I am your host, Armin, and today we have a special guest here with us. His name is JT Tran, and he is a dating coach with ABCs. Please, JT, take it away, brothers. Tell us who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into the topic.
Yeah, I'm the founder of the ABCs of Attraction and USA's #1 Asian dating coach. I've spoken at Harvard, Yale, Wharton School of Business, been on NBC, ABC, CBS, basically helping Asian men be confident and successful in the face of racism and stereotypes. Because what I found growing up, both mainstream dating advice and like pickup advice only part of it applies, right, for Asian men. A lot of the mainstream dating advice just goes wrong, but also a lot of the pickup advice sort of ignores certain realities of race. So I feel that niche, and it is my mission to help my fellow brothers.
I love that. Okay, that's actually a really good segue. What is the main difference? And I'm glad that you're here with us because you are the man to tell us what's the difference. What is the major difference between the Asian clients you're coaching and also versus the non-Asians? Like, where is like the discrepancy between the two?
So for Asian clientele, we always say like Asians aren't a monolith. There's always like different types of Asians. So when it comes to like Asian Americans, someone who was born here, they might be tall, good looking, speak English, but because they've been raised in an environment where they have faced racism and been treated like a second social class citizen, so to speak, they might look good and all of that, but their inner game, their confidence isn't there. While someone coming over from Asia, like in China, wherever, like they are the apex male. It's just that when they come over here, they aren't treated like every other guy and they just don't understand it, but they feel that, they should be getting the girls just like they did back in Asia. And in those cases here in America, it's like just teaching them what is the difference of dating, how to communicate, and how to dress in like the Western style that sexualizes them as masculine. And the thing is, like, I've had entire boot camps where no one spoke English as their first language,
Wow.
right? Like everyone is a complete fob. So the idea of trying to teach them like normal like dating advice, like, oh, be confident, like, how does that work when they come from a different culture and when they don't speak English? And so I have to like navigate these nuances. So when I do teach like a white American, black American, it is slightly different. It isn't completely different, but there is, a nuanced difference that I have to take into consideration given their context, the background, and the language, like religion and all of that.
Wow. I never knew that. Wow. Especially with, you said Chinese men are the apex, right? In it.
Yeah, yeah, a Korean man, Japanese man, like for them, it's normal for them to date and be at the top of the
Mhm.
food chain. It's just like when they come here, like American girls don't even give them the time of the day,
Mhm.
right? And so they're just like kind of at a loss as to why it doesn't operate the same. And
Mhm.
again, it's like part of it is like American dating is obviously different.
Mhm.
But part of it is like their fashion and like, American society is much more aggressive and sexualized,
Mhm.
right? And so there are these, considerations that have to be taken into account.
Mm. Now, what do you think is like the main like with inner game with specifically the clients you're coaching and everything? What is like the main kind of like sticking point they're having in difference between the like you said like the black individuals or other ethnicities that you coach?
Well, for the, I mean, it's again, it's twofold, right? Because I've got like the Asian and then the Asian American. So the Asian American, for them, if they've been raised with racism, like I was raised in the South, like Texas, so I definitely encountered like a lot of racism. We get taught, that we aren't as good as every other guy. We get called all these kind of names. We get like emasculated by the racist stereotypes in the media. So growing up, we feel this pressure to only remain with Asian girls and not date outside of a race because we simply have no chance. And if you look at the interracial, marriage rates, you'll see that Asian guys are kind of near the bottom. It's not super rare, but it is uncommon for Asian guys to marry outside of their race. So what I have to do with a lot of Asian American guys is like, no, you are just as worthy of a woman of any race as, any guy out there, white, black. It's just like these are the things that you need to do to be able to kind of step up because the barrier of entry, so to speak, it is higher for someone like me. Like I'm a 5'5" Asian guy. Like this
Mm,
is as good as it gets. And I always say, as much as I wish I was born tall, dark, and handsome, I've learned to settle for being short, stunning, and
mm,
smooth. And so I have to like outthink, outwork, and outgame
mm.
everybody in order to compete at that level.
Actually, I'm glad that you brought your height. I was going to ask you about that in a moment. Now, something I really respect about you, JT, is that first of all, I've been following you for like the last 10 years or so, and something I really respect about you is that like the man that you are like 10 years ago is like the same. Now you're just like more enhanced, more evolved. And I love that. Like you haven't changed your values, which is incredible. Okay, now that being said, let's go with your height. Now you are, I would say, I'm 5'7", so a little bit taller than you. But however, you're one of the shortest dating coaches I've met. Okay, now that's actually I love that because every dating coach is tall, but I wanted to meet a coach who is shorter than the average, man that teaches the stuff. Now, for you being a 5'5", what was that like for you in growing up and not just with women, but your own, outside of women, your own daily life? How was it being 5'5", competing with other men who are taller?
Well, I mean, anyone who says that height doesn't matter is lying to you. It obviously does. But I just don't let it remain that way. I take charge of it and I try to essentially compensate or work around it. But yeah, definitely growing up, I always thought like being Asian was a disadvantage, being short was a disadvantage, not being good looking was a disadvantage. And I would say like height and race are like the things, growing up that was used most against me, right? Um, and so like what I do tends to be a bit more, and what I teach my students tends to be a bit more like direct style, more like dominant style game to overcome any of that hurdle or perception that I'm like smaller or weaker or more, all of that. Um, but at a certain point, I accept what I cannot change
Mm,
and embrace it of who I am.
mm,
I always say be successful because you're Asian in spite of it. And the same thing with my height. It's not going to change. You could put on like I could put on like elevator shoes. Sure, okay. That just takes me from like 5'5" to like 5'7". I'm still gonna be short. It's not a massive difference to me, right? So I embrace it at this point. But I understand like a lot of guys out there, it's difficult. Multiple studies show that height plays a factor in dating success, financial success.
mm.
But again, if it's not something that you can change, just embrace it, ignore it, and try something else.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, of the guys that might be watching this, you mentioned that and you could correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to use the wrong words here, to basically kind of like get out of your head and get out of your comfort zone, to be direct, to be bold, to be assertive. That sounds like, that's what you want to do if you're caught up in your head and you're, beating yourself up. Now, for the guys watching this, some of them might take this and go 0 to 100. That might be too bold to the point where
Mhm.
it's derogatory and crass. So, what advice do you have for individuals watching this when they're taking your advice to be bold and direct? In what way should I apply it?
Well, the way I teach is I try to graduate like levels, so to speak. I typically start with indirect
Mhm.
that allows them to manage their approach anxiety, crowd control, learn how to banter, basically, rough out any of their rough edges, so to speak, because starting an indirect conversation is a lot easier and a lot takes less risk, so to speak, and any kind of mistakes that they might make aren't as costly. And then once they have achieved a certain baseline, then we start working on more direct, more sexual, more dominant style game. Because in my opinion, at least, that it requires a more mastery of their nonverbal projection, how they project their sexuality through the use of their body language, their tonality, their facial expressions, how fast they move, how slow they talk. And I will say one thing though, teaching a lot of Asian guys, they're less likely to be crass than, let's say, like a black or a white guy. Like it means something very different when I, for example, come up to like a tall blonde girl, me and my like 5'5" glory, and I tell her like, you are fucking gorgeous. I love you, right? So just saying something like that, it breaks their heuristics, right? Because if I look like a stereotype, talk like a stereotype, walk like a stereotype, people are going to treat me like a stereotype. So a little crassness can go a long way. Um, and again, though, that is the calibration one requires, whether you're a coach or the audience looking at this, like where are you, right? Are you a newbie? Then maybe kind of go like the newbie route. But if you're more intermediate, maybe like experiment with this. But I definitely say like every Asian guy should learn to master like direct game. It's not an elective when you are not conventionally attractive. It's actually, I would say, a requirement that if you're not conventionally attractive, learn direct style game.
Wow, wow. That's amazing. I love what you said there. I actually agree with that. Like cold-heartedly, 100% agree with it. I always hear from the other end. I hear coaches always saying indirect game is like more advanced. Like that's the way you should talk to every woman in the world. You should never go direct. You're losing your value and all these different concepts. What do you go ahead? Yeah.
I was about to say, I mean, I speak from a coach's perspective as to what benefits the student the most.
Mm,
Not necessarily like, oh, this idea of like all men are universally alpha and beta. Like, I don't even really agree with the entire alpha male beta
mm,
thing. But it is from the context, what benefits the student,
mm,
right? And so there are some guys where it would be more beneficial for them to learn the social skills,
mm,
the crowd control, bantering, being funny, all these sort of more indirect social cues of building attraction that, indirect has them master. And, when I see that, it's like, okay, this might be what you want. While other students, again, remember, I have students who don't speak really good English.
mm.
Like trying to have them like do like long stories or routines would be completely useless. So a more direct style where they just go up to a girl like you are fucking beautiful in their Asian accent, it just blows people's mind.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, I'm not gonna put like a blanket statement of like all men across the globe because I don't care about all men across the
Yeah.
globe. I care about my students and what benefits them at their particular moment in life.
Mm,
So considering their background, their experience level, their cultural, aptitude, what works for them, where they're at.
mm. Now, are you, when you mention like, basically kind of like matching, their temperament or whatever it is, are you speaking about like the archetype? Like you're matching with their archetype?
Sort of, right? Um, it's sort of like when some students that have like a high approach anxiety, for example, then it might make more sense for them to run through a lot of more indirect style openers. So I have this Kickstarter opener that I teach my newbie students, which essentially, you have a glass, you're at a bar, and you simply go like, "Cheers, my
Mhm.
name's JT. What's yours?" Well, you seem friendly, Sarah. Me and my friends are celebrating a birthday. Come by and say hi later. It's a very low investment type opener, but it uses the concept of social etiquette and social pressure. Because, for example, if someone goes like, "Hi, my name's JT," everyone knows what this gesture is, whether you're Asia or wherever, it's a handshake. And they're likely to respond. When you're at a bar, someone has a glass, and you go like, "Cheers,"
Mhm.
then most people understand that they're supposed to cheers you back. And it also sort of predefines an exit strategy at the end, where if they are like super nervous, um, they're not being rejected, so to speak. Like they're already, intending to leave. And obviously, if the girl wants to ask questions, then it's like the bonus round, icing on the cake where they can remain in. And so it's just more about where are they? Because some students are super experienced and they don't really need to learn that, right? They can only sort of talk. And you see this in like some naturals, for example, where naturals tend to be, at least in my experience, they find something that works for them and then they just like hone in on that and they just like keep repeating and repeating it. Some naturals are really good at being funny. Some naturals are really good at dance. Some naturals are really good at building social circles. Some naturals are really good at just being super sexual. Very rarely is a natural good at everything, right? And so the idea is like, I observe my student and it's like, what is his weaknesses and his strengths? Because it's not one size fits all. Some students might need more work in one area than the other.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, that's amazing. Now you're really articulate. I as
Thank
you're
you.
speaking, JT, I can like see your brilliance. And like, how did you how did you go about like learning human psychology and getting, more in depth into what you're doing? Because like the way you broke it down, that was really brilliant. And I wonder like where's that coming from? Like, what's your background?
Well, I am by training an aerospace engineer, literally
Wow.
rocket science.
Yeah.
So like rocket science, my
Oh, yeah,
so I
yeah.
have my all my spacecraft, like I would launch
Mm,
rockets and operate
mm,
satellites. And the thing is, when you're learning how to, a rocket, for
mm,
example, I can't teach someone the entirety of the rocket because it's such a complex system. So you break it down into subsystems. You break it down, okay, there's a nozzle, there's a fuselage, there are the fins, there's an engine, propellant, all of that, right? And then once they're able to understand the subsystems, then you put it all together and like, oh, it clicks.
mm.
And so when I got into this, I was way back in the days of like Project Hollywood, right? I was like there for Project Hollywood, the game, mystery, Neil Strauss, all of that. And for me, observing that, like I learned indirect style and I did that for about 6 months and it was great, right? When I saw Mystery approach and he could use magic tricks and I saw like you could literally see attraction being built with the girls. I'm like, holy shit, you can learn this. This is not just something that you're born with. Like, this is something that is learnable and replicable. But I also realized there were certain restrictions because what works for like a 6 foot tall white guy does not work for a short Asian guy. And then I started doing more direct style game, and then I started getting way more kind of the more sexualized results. But it helped build up these building blocks. So I started coming together like this foundation, and what I call like holistic style game, where I want to incorporate inner game, right? How we manage our thoughts and emotions. Outer game, there's like body language, nonverbals, and verbal game, what we actually say to girls. And so the way I got into coaching was completely by accident. Like I had the Asian Playboy blog and I gained a following because I was really like the only Asian guy really out there putting his face out there and talking about my adventures and my misadventures, victories and failures. And this Chinese Canadian mother called me up, and she had been reading my blog and she wanted me to help out her son who had been harassed by neo-Nazis.
Wow.
And so I told her like, all right, ma'am, for 3 days and 3 nights, I will be the big brother he never had.
Mm,
And so she flew me, got me a hotel, and then she paid me like $100 a day. I was like, holy
mm,
shit, like I can actually make a living off of this.
mm,
But I realized he was like, 18 years old, so I couldn't just teach him pick up routines
mm,
because that would lock him in, right? He's still growing. He was still a teenager. So that's why I developed the holistic style of game called the ABCs of attraction, which is like A, B, C, D, E, F, right? From attract, attitude, approach, all the way to like F. And I think we all know what F stands for, right? And so the idea is like, I want to make something where it gives him training wheels, it gives him a game plan and structure so he understands how to move it forward, but still at the same time flexible for enough for him to grow into as he grows both in age and maturity and his masculinity. So yeah, and almost like 20 years of coaching at this point, you
wow.
you tend to pick up some things.
Mm. Wow, that's incredible. Wow, that's amazing that, the mother, she, paid for everything, she had you fly down. She cared that much about her son, to go out of her way to find somebody, a professional to help him out. Wow, that's love. That is amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm lucky enough where we get a lot of word of mouth business. So I've had students where their parents bought them a boot camp. I've
Wow.
got one long-term student where literally his dad bought him like a boot camp and long-term training.
Mm,
And then just recently up in Chicago, one of my old students, Indian, he had like two kids and like, ended up like, divorcing, and he took the boot camp, had a great time, and then like years later, now his son is 21, and we all got on like a three-way phone call, and it's like, I'm buying you a boot camp because that's how much it meant to him. Like it worked for the dad, now he's doing it, paying it forward to his son. So I've been fortunate enough where I like to think that I provide a quality service that, families can tell their families or friends about us.
that is, wow. I am blown away. That is, I have no words to explain that. That's amazing. Wow. That's interesting. So I've been in this industry for the last 60 years professionally, and I've been here since 2002. No, 2000, yeah, 2002. I've been just looking at everyone's business, companies, and everything. And something I realized is that so like I have some students who they're former clients that they feel shameful to tell the world that they have I'm a life coach, that I have a life coach, or other individuals who take boot camps with other coaches they're shameful to tell the world and their friends and family that I took a boot camp. But what I'm hearing from your end is the opposite, where their family, their father and stuff that took your program, they're they're embracing this. So what do you think is something that you're doing that's completely different that the family are embracing? There's a lot of love circulating what you're doing.
Yeah, I think it is sad to say that our community, pickup seduction, whatever you want to call it,
Mhm,
does unfortunately have a bad reputation.
mhm,
There are some bad actors that, have both had negative press to even, trouble legally, so to speak,
mhm,
that anybody can simply start a website and claim that they're a coach.
mhm,
And so I suppose the way it works with us and like how people talk about us, at least I like to think so, is I've always been very careful about being honest and having integrity as best as that I can and running a very ethical business. And so me as a teacher, my success as a teacher is the success of my students. So my clients are first and foremost, and we always try to maintain our word as best as possible. It also helps having just sort of like media training, and I've been fortunate enough, like I said, to have been asked and paid to speak at universities like Ivy League universities like Harvard and Yale. I've also done like interviews on TV. Like I've literally had like female reporters embed themselves on boot camp and watch us.
mhm,
So been on TV. Like I said, I was just like on BBC just like last week.
mhm,
And so it is you have to create a permission structure, I guess you could say, where people can say like, oh, this company, this coach has these sort of like credentials,
mhm,
and isn't like the bad apples of the community, right? And at the same time, I know like, I've been told like, oh, we shouldn't call ourselves pickup artists. And but at the same time, like I think with ABCs of Attraction, at least the students I teach, we're not really dating coaches, but we're also not really pickup artists, so to speak, because neither one really works for our clients, right? It has to be very practical based, but it can't be like the full on like red pill, right? That is very like misogynistic and very manipulative and very like using people. There has to be room for a person to grow and not simply be like, I have to get short-term results right now, but the coach doesn't realize, okay, you get short-term results right now, but you're costing your client long-term healthy growth
mhm,
because you do this long enough and you see people go through these cycles where, yeah, they can, you know, fuck a lot of people, but realize that they are still unhappy as a person,
mhm.
right? And so it's a very delicate balancing act.
Mhm.
But I think from a business point of view, one does, want to create a permission structure whereby students or prospective students can be able to say like, hey, this coach has these sort of credentials. He's not like all the bad apples out there.
I like that. It's a permission structure.
Mhm.
I'm gonna put that in my notes. It's powerful. Okay, interesting. All right. Can you tell me what role models or mentors did you have growing up, and what lesson did they teach you?
I mean, like in pickup.
Anything. I have some individuals who tell me their fathers, their son. It could be anybody. Anybody who was a role model and a role model, that a mentor that helped you out throughout your life. It could be anything.
Okay, I mean, I guess you could say if you will, like twofold. Obviously, there's my mom.
Mhm.
Um, basically raised as a single mother because like my biological father, Vietnamese, got thrown into a communist re-education camp. And so there's that. And coming over to America, raising, a couple of Vietnamese kids was very difficult. And growing up, I was very angry because, she made certain decisions that, as a teenager, I didn't agree with or I didn't understand. As an adult, I do now. But you have to imagine, especially like this Gen Z generation, imagine moving to a completely different country, like during a war,
Mhm.
and having to learn the language, being harassed and racism, not having your college degree be accepted because it comes from a foreign country,
Mhm.
and you have to like work from the fucking bottom,
Yeah.
right? Just absolute shit. And raising kids, and even though as a teenager I didn't understand a lot of things, and we were raised poor and like in the South and tons of racism, but now as an adult I completely understand. I realize that the level of difficulty, the grit, the emotional resilience you have to do. Like imagine in this day and age where we've got wars going on, right? We've got like issues of immigration. What if that happened right now? Do I have the grit to be able to uplift my entire life, go to a different country, start at the fucking bottom, learn the language while still being like harassed and, end up being successful? And that's what she was able to do. And that's just like in life, right? And then I would say just in pickup, like my first mentor was like, Mystery Neil Strauss. They were running a boot camp and it was an absolute revelation. Like it was like a light bulb popping up when I saw him like approach this two set. Um, it was a kind of like a quasi like Japanese club on like Hollywood. It was Japanese themed. And it was like two white girls. He approaches them and he does like this magic trick with the straw in the cup,
Mhm.
right? And I was like so nervous because I'd never really been to bars and clubs, never approached girls, and just seeing that, I was like, holy shit, this works. This absolutely fucking works. And then I just became, a complete OCD. I went out for like a year, 4 to 6 nights a week, holding down a 9 to 5 engineering job, creating an Excel spreadsheet that's like literally 100 pages long. Because like I saw someone do it. I saw Mystery do it. I'm like, okay, he can do it. I can do it.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Great. Wow. So it will be your mother and then mystery. Is that a
Yeah.
fair? Okay. Okay. I love that. Yeah. That's good. Someone from life and someone from pickup. That's amazing. Yeah. Now, do you have and you can't pick the 18-year-old, it's got to be somebody else. Can you can you name a client that you had where it was, I don't want to say a hard case, but it was more challenging than your previous clients have had? And then what breakthrough did they have, and what's their life now?
Um, well, I mean, I could use something like recent where they're still on their journey. They have an incredibly hard journey in front of them.
Mhm.
Um, essentially like a 40-year-old virgin, right?
Mhm.
Asian, lives with his parents, very high expectations but
Mhm.
low resilience.
Mhm.
And there's just someone that was referred to us by an Asian like matchmaker who thought that he could use her help, and he definitely did. Sign up for the boot camp, and just showing up to the program, he was scared. Like I actually had to get up on the phone on with him and just like, you already paid, like just drive down here. And he did. And first night, I did all the approaches. Like he didn't do a single approach. But what ended up happening was he was able to see, right? Because he's like only like 2 inches shorter than me. So like no real big difference, right? And he was able to get into a conversation for the first time in his life that lasted with like 20, 30 minutes with someone from the opposite sex. He got like a hug and a kiss on the cheek,
Mm.
right? That's more, than he's ever gotten, excluding a female relative in his entire life,
Wow.
right? And then like on the second night, he's like, okay, finally he can approach. And said, okay, approach those, these girls. And then he literally says like, oh, he tried, and it's like, and he kind of like stomped his feet, and he's like, oh, then girls aren't even looking at me,
Mm.
they're not even talking to me. It's like, why do you expect girls to look at you? Why do you expect girls to talk to you? You have to make it happen.
Mm.
Like you're not a male model, so you have to make it happen. That's it. That's the only way this works. You have to take charge. And so he does end up approaching this two set of girls, does a Kickstarter, like something on the order of like, hey neighbor, right? Because we're like in the middle and they're over a table here. And it goes for maybe 2 minutes, whatever, right? And then we walk around the club and I say, okay, there's a 5 sets, 5 girls, like two very attractive blondes. And he goes in and it's actually going pretty good. It's like, hey, let's go to our home base and the second floor. And so like, we relocate them downstairs. And the first two set that he had approached
Mm.
saw him. So now he's like sitting in between those two blondes and the other 3 girls. And they literally like approach him while he's talking to the two blondes and like grab him and pull him out and they start talking to him. And I was like telling him like this is the magic of social cues. Because let's be real, like a 5'3", 40-year-old Asian guy, you're not a hot guy. But the action, the intangible attraction that is created by social cues, that's what made you more attractive, right? Because they weren't like super hooked on him from the original approach, but when they saw him later having the confidence,
Mm.
right, to bring over 5 girls, being surrounded by two attractive blondes,
Mm.
right? It's like that was a great example of like you don't have to be tall, you don't have to be white, you don't have to be handsome. You can get by with just having a command presence, and I think that was like a massive epiphany for him.
Mm.
So yeah, I think like I think that's something that everybody can learn from.
Mm. Honestly, I could hear you talk all day, JT. That was a beautiful story. Okay. I was envisioning it in my mind, him approaching the 5 set, being between both of the blondes. No, that is wow.
You
Wow.
don't see that every day, right? You don't
Yeah,
see some short
exactly.
Asian dude with two hot blondes on their
Mm.
arm, right? It doesn't
Exactly.
happen
Yeah.
every day.
That must have completely shattered his world. Wow, that is incredible.
Yeah, yeah, it is, seeing and doing. I think that is one of like the most important first steps that you can actually do, right? And that is your job as a coach to role model that because people can say a lot of stuff, people can show YouTube videos, but until you actually see it in person,
Mhm.
right? And then have you do it yourself and you can start to internalize that process. Otherwise it's just all theory and abstract and like mental masturbation.
Mm. That's so true. Yeah. No, that's and I love that you took initiative, obviously as a coach, but you spoke, you were going out there and showing him, how to have conversation. There's a lot of coaches out there that they wouldn't do that. They would just sit back, right? Right? They would say, no, 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 this is your time. I'm just here to teach you. I don't want to approach. I want to here to teach you. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna name any names. I
Yeah.
don't get into the politics of it
Yeah.
all,
Yeah.
right? But
Mhm.
there are definitely guys that, they read an ebook and all of a sudden they call themselves coaches and then they're like, oh, just follow my direction and they never demonstrate.
Yeah.
Um, or the guys who say that they're in a relationship and it's
Mhm.
like, oh, because I'm in a relationship, you're not going to see me approach.
Mhm.
So there are some guys that use that as an excuse. Like I actually put a video out not too long ago when me and a student,
Mhm.
former virgin, in New York is Valentine's weekend. Here's a tip for you guys. Go out Valentine's weekend. Like any girl that's out Valentine's weekend is single, right? It was like shooting fish in a barrel. But me and my student, like Harvard guy, right? And we ended up, or I approached this two set of these college girls,
Mhm.
right? And I gave my student like the hotter blonde,
Mhm.
and you know was walking around the club, right? And he was saying like people were just staring at him. He never felt so like envied by people
Yeah.
ever, you know. And we took him back to my hotel, and I got like the little infill video for those who watch my YouTube. And then like the next day, he just gave me a great big hug. He's like, I've never experienced that in my entire life ever.
And honestly, he's stating facts. It's so true. It's not common for anyone to go to the club and take girls home. It's just a lot of people, a lot of guys just don't do that. So for you to show him that possibility, it's just like, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to overstate the one night stand. You know, it
yeah.
happens. I do believe that if a guy wants to be a regular dater,
Mhm.
they probably want to have more sort of like reliable game,
Mhm.
long-term game, so to
Yeah.
speak, that isn't going to be dependent necessarily on just purely going out to bars and clubs. I think
Mhm.
going out to bars and clubs, great for volume, great for ironing out mistakes and experimenting, trying new things, seeing what your strengths and weaknesses are. But I think that for most guys, it's about self-improvement. It's about having their choice of women instead of being the one that is chosen and just getting that experience, right? And so, whether it's dating apps or day game, night game, I think that just being someone who's like a guy that can just, you know, be someone who can get dates and go on dates and have girls think this guy is like the best date I've ever been on. I think that's I think that's a hallmark more than just like the one night stand. Although they're fucking cool, not gonna
Yeah.
lie.
I wasn't focusing on a one night stand more so than the paradigm shift of going to a club, having a connection, and then whether you take them home or not is irrelevant. Just matter of being able to just do it once. Being able
Yeah.
to see that possibility. I feel like that's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the things that every coach should do, if you don't already do it yourself, is if you go out to night game, just have your student and you just like observe, first of all, like observe like all the other guys. Like who here is actually approaching,
Yep.
right? It's like maybe 10% of the entire club, exactly, right? Maybe 10% at best of the entire club, like
Mhm.
some guys approaching girls. So it's like if we do it, we are in that top 10%,
Mhm.
right?
That's so
So
true.
I think
Yeah.
that was always a really good revelation for guys who realize that, hey, by me doing this, I'm better than 90% of the guys
So
here.
true. Yeah. That's so true. And not even like anywhere in the world. You just cool approaching, even if you're not that great, doesn't matter. You knowing how to go up to a girl and just have a conversation, you're ahead of the game. There's, like I occasionally, what I'll do with some of my students is, or just myself, I'll just walk in the city for like a few blocks and I'm kind of like observing, like who's talking to who. Nobody. Okay. No guys approaching anybody. They might check the girl out 20 times, but they're never going to approach her. And as like you mentioned, you just being able to do that, even if it's not as successful, statistically speaking, you're gonna bound to have a way more interesting life than the other person who is skipping out on talking to the people he wants to. Oh, that's incredible.
No, yeah, it's definitely a rarefied skill,
Mhm.
right? And it's
Yeah.
something that translates into other areas of your life, both like business, marketing, sales, friends, dealing with family,
Mm.
right? So learning this, it's cool, but we can use it in so many other places as well. And it just pays, dividends. And it's something that, I wish I had learned when I was 16. Fuck, man. I had
Yeah.
to learn it when I was like, in my 20s.
Mm. Actually, that's a good question. Now, when did you start? Officially start?
Officially, I guess like when I was 24,
Before.
around that. I mean, I had a college girlfriend, but it was completely by accident. At the time, you have to remember, I did aerospace engineering. I was at an engineering college. So there's like 10 dudes for every one girl. And she ended up choosing me. She was like this 5'9", tall, blonde, blue-eyed girl, which is probably where I get my appreciation for the tall queens. I love me a tall queen, right? So she chose me. It was only till afterwards where I asked her why was she attracted to me, that she told me, and like I still remember it to this day. And it's like, she was saying I lit up the room, I was smiling, and then like I ignored her, which made her confused because like the moment she stepped on campus, like every dude was hitting on her. But I didn't ignore her because I thought it was cool. I ignored her because I was too scared to talk to her, right? But she didn't realize that because I was like social with all my buddies and I was like smiling and being happy. Um, but in retrospect, if you think about it, those are just pickup skills. And that's all pickup is. It's not magic. It is just things that we have observed in real life, like the naturals. And now we just codify into like chunks or subsystems that a student can learn in a very processable manner.
Mm. No, I love that. That's really, honestly, you have a lot of things I want to expand on. No, that's really good. Now, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you today?
I'm in my 40s.
Your
I've
40s?
got the
Oh,
good Asian genes. So,
JT, you're in your 40s?
yeah.
I'm 35. I thought you were like maybe 37.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. It's both the Asian genetics, but also do like the Korean skincare. So, do the entire full 10 steps, right?
10 steps, yeah. No, wait, listen, whatever you're doing, okay? Listen, like you're like a vampire. I'm serious. Like 10 years ago when I saw you, I mean, you were not that jacked, okay? But you look the same, okay? The exact same like a vampire. Not because you're Asian. No, that's not why. It's because you'll just take care of yourself. I'm gonna
Thank
base it
you.
on
Thank
that.
you.
Take care
I
of yourself.
mean, one of the interesting things about being more fit, like I learned game when I was thin, and then it was because I thought, more plates equals more dates. So I was like, "All right, I'm gonna get jacked, go to the beach, learn surfing, and I realized like that wasn't helping. And so I learned pickup. And then when I started doing pickup, I stopped working out, right? And it
Mm.
got up to the point like during COVID, I got 201 pounds, right? So I was like technically obese. But like we do like our Euro Tour program, which is our inner game program for Asian guys. And that affects me too, because like we're doing like really deep inner game, like to the point where like we're crying. Like that's how deep the inner game
Wow.
is. And between that working, just walking around Europe and taking stairs and eating good food, I lost like 5 to 10 pounds, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna keep this going, right? And so I ended up losing like 60 pounds, and that just takes a lot of mental discipline. It's also very similar to pickup in a way, fitness and pickup, because the results you get out of either picking up women or fitness is what you put into it with the discipline and the commitment. And that's like losing 60 pounds. And I get to the point where I, get the six pack abs. But the interesting thing is, it doesn't make women more attracted to me, right? I'm not more attractive because I'm fit, even in having a six pack. Not that I'm saying you shouldn't be fit. Fitness is good for multiple reasons, but actually, approaching like it doesn't affect my approach to girls, right? But again, I am who I am, right? I've been doing this for decades at this point. But I will say that it helps in the bedroom a lot. It helps like, lasting, being more energetic in bed, and helps with LMR, last minute reservations. Because I remember when I was fat, I would take off my shirt, and I've known that this happened a couple of times where the girl, we're making out, things are getting hot and heavy, shirt comes off, and she looks at me, she looks at my body, and I could tell she's getting turned off. So that happened multiple times. Now, like I take off my shirt, and now like, it actually sometimes they get excited about it. So
That's so funny. Yeah. Wow. I've always been like skinny. I've never like, but I hear what you're saying though. Like when you work out and you start to look like better, like there's a component of that where you're like, damn, I did that. I'm
yeah.
the one who woke up every day and ate, the chicken, broccoli, rice, whatever. I'm the one who did it. It's like such a prideful feeling. Do you feel that? And I kind of, well, I won't speak for you. Do you feel that you having a better body or better physique, do you feel like mentally did it, not, I don't want to say you made you more confident, no, but did it make you like more, I guess, more secure in your own body about who you are?
Not secure in my own body. I
Hmm.
mean, I think I've always benefit, like I said, I learned game when I was skinny. I learned game when I was fat, and it's like no difference to me. Like I can game at any point, any look, right? You know, I'm in my jock era and I'm wearing more like jock type clothes. But if I was fat, I'd like suit up or do other kind of style to essentially compensate for my sexual market value. So it doesn't really matter to me in that regards. But I will say from a mental health point of view, I did not realize this when I was 200 pounds. Like I had like brain fog, at least in comparison. So once I actually started losing weight, I realized like my mental acuity was like increasing. I could think faster. I wasn't as irritable. Um, and so it definitely helped in that regard. It's not in my own personal confidence, although that's again going to be very nuanced to each individual, right? Because, for me, like I think I'm attractive whether I'm fat or fit. It doesn't really matter to me. But thinking faster, thinking better, just overall mental wellness is definitely of a benefit. Um,
Can you go more into that? Thinking faster? I don't quite understand what you mean. Can you give an example? Like, what do you mean? Like, girl give you a shit
well, I
text
mean,
and
have
you're
you
like,
heard of
damn.
something called like brain fog?
Hmm.
It's sort of like, when you wake up in the morning and you're just kind of thinking a little bit slower, you need like your coffee, or words don't come as quickly to you. And I didn't realize this, but I probably wasn't, as having the mental acuity as in my 20s when I was like 30 and like 200 pounds or whatever. But now that I've lost weight, I can see the comparison. I can feel the difference in my thought patterns. Part of it is I'm highly self-aware of what I feel and what I think. And so I could tell that there is a difference in how um how well I thought what I was saying to myself. And yeah, it's just like I think fast. So like the brain fog has lifted.
Interesting. Okay, I have to look more into that. I heard you, okay, but I just have to look more into that. That's really interesting. I wonder if it's maybe the oxygen going to your brain, when you're fat versus you're skinny, or whether you're build, something with, I don't know, I'm not sure. I have to look more into it. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. There's even like, what they call it, neurotropics and stuff like that. That a
Yeah.
lot of people that go deep into that, where, the idea of having better thought processes.
Mhm.
There's entire science behind that. But at least for me, it was a very measurable difference in the way I thought.
That's really interesting. I love that. Really good insight. Wow. So you being really self-aware of just, your thought processes and everything. What advice do you have for somebody who is in the noise? They're in the chatter in their mind, and they're not able to be as self-aware as yourself. Obviously, albeit, you have eons of experience. But for that guy who's in his head and is having all the chatter, what can he do? What can he work on to be more self-aware about what's going on in his life?
Yeah. So that anxiety or like the chatter comes from like the basal ganglia part of the brain, right? That we fall into the bad habits, of going into job interview mode, for example, of asking girls a lot of questions, even though we know we shouldn't, people fall into that bad habit. And the rising cortisol levels in your bloodstream, the old fight or flight, right? So there are multiple things that are happening, and dependent upon the person, again, one size doesn't fit all. Whether it's like overwhelming mental chatter, some people they're not necessarily experiencing mental chatter, they're just experiencing rising cortisol levels, which makes them, feel stressed the fuck out, right? So if you can control one aspect, then you're able to sort of like control other aspects of your game system, so to speak. So again, the idea of being holistic, right? If you can control your body, you can control your mind, which can control your emotions, and which then therefore affects your results. So for example, the idea of using power poses. There's like a Harvard study where there's a difference between like power, like high power poses and low power poses, where they measure the testosterone difference as well as the cortisol. So if you take the old like power pose, big stance and everything like that, I know in Western society they say like, oh, that's very confident. You're taking up space, so you look confident. That's a secondary effect. The actual principle first, what's actually happening is you're creating testosterone because that's a signal. Because what you're doing is you're activating your muscles, right? It's like going to the gym and you're sending a signal to your muscle that you're about to embark upon a physical activity. So it starts to give you testosterone, which makes you feel more confident while lowering your cortisol. So now physically, you're feeling better,
Mm,
right? You're getting more testosterone, makes you feel more confident. You're losing cortisol, which makes you feel less stressed. The other thing you can do is try to activate your prefrontal cortex. So the idea, like say, for example, counting down from five, right? Whether it comes from like the 3 second rule, just count down to three and go. Again, part of that is like people said that as like, oh, that's just just do the 3 second rule and approach. What's actually happening is if you think about it,
mm,
numbers don't exist in the real world, right? Like number three does not exist. There's no physical existence of the number three.
mm,
And so only us humans can think of these abstract meta objects, right? My dog can't think of the number three. Only us humans, and that's because we have the prefrontal cortex. So when you count down from like five, four, three, two, one, you're forcing your brain to utilize your prefrontal cortex more than your basal ganglia. So
mm,
now this is a form of changing what's occurring in your brain. So you can both affect your physical biochemistry, right? Getting testosterone while dumping cortisol, and what's happening in your brain. And in that way, you change, controlling your body, controlling your mind, you can start to affect how you feel. And it's like these little tips, these little techniques that can help with that chatter, so to speak. Because
mm,
that fear can come from multiple sources. So just it's not like one size fits all, right? But those are just a couple of tips for anyone who wants to, get over their approach anxiety.
mm. That's really deep. Wow. Hmm. Let's see. Now, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, getting yourself ready for it. Is any of this related to gaining a reference experience and knowing that if you gain that reference experience, that's going to show you that you are able to do this? Is this similar to that? Is this around the same ball field?
Not really. I mean, only in so much as it's obviously in our brain power, right? The idea is, if you were to hook up an MRI machine to your brain, it is the idea is like you would see your prefrontal cortex start to light up and your basal ganglia start to be less active, right? And the basal ganglia is like that little lizard part of your brain.
Mhm.
And so it's just forcing you to stop paying attention to the little monkey that says, don't, right? I mean, long term, you want referential experience because, our brains, there's neuroplasticity, right? Our brain doesn't know the difference between what we think of rejection. Like you can lay in bed and, just imagine, fantasize or catastrophize 100 different rejections, and physically your body doesn't know, right? And so it's important to, like you said, have that referential experience and realize, hey, nothing terrible happened to me to approach. But again, like the first step is to actually get out there and do it. And sometimes, like I said, I've had students that literally just started crying, like in the middle of the club, just tears running down their face, and no amount of pushing, no amount of being a drill sergeant, like yelling at them. Because I used to believe like, oh, just be a drill sergeant, and that works for some students, but not all students are one size fits all. And so you have to be able to understand the psyche and how to teach different students. And so sometimes they need other modals, so to speak, to for them to get past their barrier in order to gain that very essential referential experience.
Mhm. Okay, I love that. Now, when you're a student, okay, I'm just gonna pick myself. Let's say I was your student and I was interacting with a woman or whatever. Are you able to, and this is not just like from your experience, but physically, like, are you kind of able to like see their aura or see like the differences in the subtleties that they're doing? And then based on that observation, you figure out, okay, like what's going on internally. So for example, like if there's a student like myself, let's say a student, and I am starting stuttering all over the place, I'm kind of like forcing the words out of my mouth. When you're looking at that, are you able to like literally like see exactly like the different energy outputs and inputs of the discomfort. I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
Well, I come from an engineering background, so I tend not to go into the entire idea of sort of like mysticism
Mm,
or like things of that nature that can't be measured. Again, that's just coming from my background.
mm,
But what I can do is read people's body language, read the situation, read the context, the nuance. Just comes from like high situational awareness and body awareness. Like, what does that body language mean
mm,
in relationship to like the girl, right? A girl could be like, smiling and laughing, and you, the guy, might be thinking, "Oh, this is really having fun," but maybe she's just kind of looking over the shoulder and like girl coding, like her
yeah.
girl behind you, right? And it's a slight difference because, like, if someone does like this, like when you see the top whites of their eyes, that means like a negative emotion,
Mm,
right? And
mm,
so I have, the years of experience to be able to tell
mm,
via their body language whether the interaction is going very positively or poorly. Um, but I don't have telepathy, mind reading, right?
mm,
I don't simply feel it, right? But I can break it down intellectually and understand, given a composite
mm,
of all these signals, what's in how they relate to the women, whether that is going in the positive, trending positively or
mm.
trending negatively.
Okay, great. Thank you for answering that. That was actually my own question. I've always wondered in other coaches, are you able to see? But I like the way you said it. It's not that it's your background with, the things you have learned and everything. No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. Okay, cool. I got like a few more questions here for you. But before I go on, is there a question that you wanted me to ask you?
Uh, I mean, we covered a lot.
We have, yes, we
So
have.
I'm not entirely too sure. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay.
That means just hit me with what you got.
Okay, cool. So I see that there's a lot of books in the back. Can you give a couple or a few recommendations, books on game and books, not just game, like self-development, let's be more specific. Also books about life. Do you have recommendations from both sides?
I mean, there's like the old, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger one.
Yes. Yep. Awesome.
Um, when I was, like I said, when I used to think two more plates equals more dates, I do like the bro science, right? Not just because of what it is like, oh, this feels good. It's like I would like research the different exercises, look at like, the nutrition of it. Um, and it was something that I enjoy when I'm enjoying learning something, right? Um, and then there's the one book. Oh, what is it called? Emotional Talents by Coleman, right? That was a good one. And then I like to read science fiction. Like it still harkens back to my nerdy side when I used to think that I was going to become an astronaut and have a globe and I pretend to like float with the globe, but I didn't end up wanting to join the Air Force. I didn't want to join the military, so the closest I got was becoming an aerospace engineer. So read sci-fi. I've got my science books. So.
Super cool. Cool. All right. Any other books you want to recommend?
I mean, whatever just like helps them. I will say that I am a big reader, but when it comes to recommending books to my clients, I tend to be a little bit sparing
Mhm.
simply because I know my audience and that if they could just stay home and read all about self-improvement, that's all they would do. But the reality is you need to put, boot to ass and get out there, right? You need to separate the wheat from the chaff, pedal to the metal, and not get lost in the mental masturbation that is like, you know, book help, right? This is self-help, not shelf help.
Oh, that's a really good way to put it. I like that. Book help, shelf help. Like that. Okay, cool. Now, for yourself, JT, in your own personal life, and you could share whatever you want. You don't have to go super into it. How is your personal life looking like after being a coach for so many years?
Um, I would say like I've had multiple long-term relationships. I've even had girls that that we dated long term and were part of the company, both in like the brand
So
as
cool.
well as being a wing girl.
Mhm.
Obviously, when you break up, it's very complicated. Yeah, right. Because there's employment involved as well as like the personal relationship. I think one of the longest terms, was like an 8-year relationship I had with a model out in London. At this point, I am not someone that is looking to get married. I might, never say never. But I'm fortunate enough where my brother has like, kids, so the pressure is not on me to have kids, and I could just be the cool uncle. But maybe it's because I've lived a very adventurous life. I have no current desire to be in the institution of marriage, and I enjoy being a bit of a playboy still.
Mm. Okay, great. Honest is the best policy. Love it. That's good. Good. Now, in your own, how long have you been professionally coaching?
Uh, 16, 17 years.
Jeez. Okay. Wow. Okay. From those, okay, let's just round up to 2 decades. So in that 2 decade mark, how did you grow as a coach? And what was maybe like one or two of the things that allowed you to grow?
Good question. I mean, you see obviously in the pickup industry a life cycle, right? Where coaches, they'll come in big, hula baloo, flash in the pan, make a big, big noise, and then they end up burning out,
Mhm.
right? Or they end up starting, flame wars and get into fights because like, oh, my kung fu is better than your kung fu, right? All this kind of political nonsense. Or they burn out and they come back and they become more like religious, spiritual type gurus,
Mm, yeah.
right?
Mhm.
I have learned, like I've gone through burnout periods, but I've learned because I would used to be like hardcore pickup, go like 110, 120% every single weekend, every single boot camp. But I've learned to realize it's more of a marathon, right?
Mhm.
More of a journey where I can perform at like 80, 90% while still giving my students 100, 110% results,
Mhm.
right? But because like boot camps, at least the way I run them, are just like physically draining, mentally draining, and emotionally draining, right? And if I am going to be able to service all of my clientele at the level that they deserve, I have to maintain enough of myself where I do not burn out, right? And so you have to do like think of it as a marathon and not a sprint. But I will say that interestingly, when I got like, more and more famous, I became significantly more arrogant, right? And like entitled. Until like like I said, like the girl that I was dating for 8 years, like she called me out on it, right? And sometimes you need someone, that can be your equal and look you in the face and tell you what you're doing is wrong. Because I remember I was like just being arrogant to the wait staff and just like kind of acting like a complete dick. And then she called me out on it, and I had to really think about it. And I realized just because I'm like, been on TV and all this kind of stuff, it doesn't make me entitled, right? I am a success because of my audience, because of my clients, because of my students. That's why I'm successful. And so, I've become much more present in that and not simply believe like, oh, it's like my kung fu is better than everyone else's. It's like as a coach, I don't define myself by fame anymore or like what other coaches are doing. I define myself like of my students. Are they successful? Are they getting the results? Are they happy? Um, but also just practical advice I would give to a coach like you and everyone else is always be learning. Whether that's learning public speaking, learning how to speak on the stage, learning how to sell your services to colleges, learning how to speak on the media. You'd be surprised by how many, PUA dating coaches do not fucking know how to spin the media or go on TV. And there's a reason why like so many dating coaches and pickup artists just fucking suck. They get on TV and they try to hit on like the news reporter and they get a bad reputation because they don't understand. They have no media training. Um, and going beyond just learning your own style of pickup, dating, coaching, whatever you want to call it, whether that's being very externally based techniques in real life, or maybe there's like emotional work. So, I'll still take seminars of very stripes from business to whatever. And even if I can only learn 5, 10%, that's, very money well spent. Because
Mm.
at this point I have so much knowledge. But as Bruce Lee said, if your cup is full, then you're not learning anything. So, have an empty cup. So you can, even if you're learning 5, 10%, it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Wow. Did you have more you want to share?
I mean, just as a coach, I think it's to grow as a coach, as his business, learn different coaching skills. Like I said, it isn't just coaching in person, it's like giving speeches at colleges. That's a different clientele, right? Learning how to be on TV, just learning all the different aspects. It isn't just, picking up women. It's also like how do you teach in a way that a student can absorb?
Mm.
Because one way does not work for every single student because you're only thinking from your perspective, right? For me, like I have to think from a perspective like a white guy, a black guy, Asian guy, Asian American guy. So I understand very intimately the way I think is not the way other people think. So sometimes you have to put yourself in a student's shoes and realize like, okay, if my coaching lessons are going to be more powerful and impactful, it has to be deployed in different modalities such that it can be absorbed. Because I've literally had students who are like neurodivergent and they don't think in terms of like, words. Other than a student like, yeah, it's like I don't have words in my head. It's just like whatever words come out of my mouth. There are people that are completely different thinking than you. And so you have to have the wherewithal to put yourself in their shoes and like, okay, how best can my lessons impact them if they don't think like me?
Wow. As I'm like, there's moments in this podcast as you're speaking, JT, I literally like I forget that I'm here. I'm like just like I can't explain it. Like everything zones out. I'm just like I'm actively listening to you. And like that's what I'm saying. Like I could listen to you all day.
No,
Like
thank you.
you have a radio station, I'll listen to you, tune in all day. Okay, cool. Awesome. All right. Let me see. I have one more question. I'm trying to remember what it was. Okay. So this is a question, honestly, where I'm insecure to ask it. I just find it to be silly, but I'm going to ask you anyway. So it's about the concept of lay counts. Okay. I'm not going to ask you what your lay count is. Okay. However, there's a lot of every time I ask individuals like, "Hey, I'm doing a podcast, and I want questions." Everybody always asks me about lay counts. So I'm not going to get into your lay count. However, how important would you say are or is lay counts?
I mean, depends on what you're coaching, right? Like I don't coach marriage. I don't coach like long-term relationships, although I've been in them.
Mhm.
So it's one of those things like if you've never been laid, how are you going to teach guys how to have sex,
Mhm.
right? Um, I will say also, this goes back to what I was talking about media training and how so many pickup artists don't understand how we are perceived and why the overall perception of pickup artist seduction game, whatever you want to call it, is so negative, is because you can take these sound bites and spin them and clip farm them. So
Mm.
I just always say, that number doesn't represent, how I value women. But
Mhm.
it's important, like obviously when you're talking to students, that I convey that I do have that wealth of experience, of life experience with women of all colors, beauty levels and countries. So um, it's important enough, that you have the experience
Mhm.
um, and you can showcase it in your teaching methods. But at a certain point, it just becomes this sort of circle jerk. My kung fu is better than your kung fu,
Essentially.
right? Again, what is more important is, the experience of the client
Mm.
and is it enough that that knowledge that you're conveying that they can absorb? Because, okay, sure, maybe you have like say 300 lays. Are you able to break them all down in
Mm.
different ways that multiple students can absorb and learn from it? Or is it just a bragging or marketing strategy, which I guess, has its own, you know, thing going for it, right?
Mhm.
So there's some importance to it, sure.
Yeah. No, I respect your answer. I liked how you were really specific with the words you used. I love that. No, that's good. And we're in the same ballpark. I personally don't like that question. It has such a Neanderthal type of like barbarian like type of like concept to it. But yeah, I hear you. No, I hear you on pickup artists and stuff being on the media and not knowing what concepts are unnecessary. The green world doesn't need to hear about it, or just sort of like yeah, the whole pickup artist lay count is like such a big thing to them. But when you go outside of that, it's like you mentioned, it's about the experiences you have versus the number of women you have laid and stuff. But no, I
Yeah, but you can also sort of tell, at least in person, if you see someone in person, you're gonna tell like that's a guy that fucks.
yeah,
Well, you can just tell in person that's a guy that fucks, right? I
that's
mean,
true. Yeah.
it just becomes obvious.
Okay.
But I think a lot of times guys just use that as like marketing or bragging rights or just
Mhm.
whatever, right? So, but again, a coach, at least in the pickup seduction part, like has to have enough wealth of experience to be able to break that down to students.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, awesome. All right, JT, I don't have any more questions for you right now, but this call has been amazing. And I do definitely want to have you back in here with kind of like a bigger panel. I'm sure, there will be other mixture of questions, other folks will have for you as well. But honestly, this was really amazing. Thank you so much, for coming through and providing all your knowledge and wisdom. And I feel like there's a gazillion more, that you haven't said yet, but I definitely want to, poke your brain in the future calls to come.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on anytime. Obviously, I have certain specialties in helping my Asian brothers, although obviously I help men of all races. And for anyone who's interested, you can go to my website, abcsofattraction.com. We run boot camps as well as tours like Latin Tour, Euro Tour. And if they want to sign up for a 30-day free trial period of my online classes in field videos, they can go to abcsofattraction.com/academy/special.
Okay, awesome. And I will put down the links in the description as well for all of you to definitely follow JT and definitely sign up for his boot camps. His brother is a brilliant man. Yeah, and the one thing I really like about you, JT, is that you have been in this game for a minute, for like a long time, but you're really professional. You're really honest and you're really respectful. That is something that is, unfortunately, I don't see that often with older dating coaches.
Yeah, yeah, I think that sometimes they either let the fame or the ego get to their head.
Mhm,
But, like I said, there was a moment where I had to check myself, and I was beginning on TV. I was speaking at colleges,
mhm,
and whatever fame that came with it, I had to make myself understand that I'm not simply entitled to that. My success is because of what my audience, my students, have, and I owe my success to them. And yeah, I'm not into the politics. I think that's just ridiculous and everything like that. So
Okay, great. Well, I really respect you, man. This was a great podcast. Thank you again, JT, for being here. All right, until next time.
thank you.
Thank you.